She's a jurist. Judge Navi Pillay has had a checkered professional life. She has worked internationally. She continues to work internationally. She's had an office in the United Nations in the Human Rights Office. And she currently does a lot of work, and that includes also chairing a committee of the high-level panel. Welcome to our program, Judge Navi Pillay. It's good to have you here. We just had a chat with the chairperson of the panel, and he introduced to us, that is the Khalema Batlante, introduced to us the various work areas as he called them. And you had one of those work areas. Can you tell us what does your scope entail?
Well, first let me say that I accepted to be on this panel, which is sponsored by the United Nations Development Program. This is the first time the UN is supporting such an initiative, which means we are the very first country where Parliament has indicated that they want to look into their own performance to see whether the laws they've passed are helping people. So as a former UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, I salute this initiative because we always want the politicians, the government, to be accountable. So that's the importance of this process. We are in 3 working groups, as you rightly mentioned. Ours is the one looking at nation building and social cohesion. Now, I know these are buzzwords, but this always concerned South Africa. We want to be one nation. We want to have Ubuntu and respect each other's rights and dignity. That we hope not only to consult experts who have worked on this, but we want to go out to the community to ask how they see the situation. There's lots of divisions and unhappiness in South Africa right now, and the focus would be on how best Parliament can address this.
Social cohesion and nation building. We're 22 years in the making as a nation. In your own view, how far have we fared? How have we fared in constituting a coherent, cohesive nation?
Let me say that speaking internationally and speaking in the context of Africa, clearly South Africa has taken the lead in complying with international standards in respect of many issues, one being refugees, for instance, and has, through a good constitution, set up a culture of values and respect for everyone. Now, how far as the parliamentary efforts and laws and activities so far achieve that, I think we've gone a long way. We all see improvement in front of our eyes. We see a great deal of action and continuing dialogue initiated by Parliament and by civil society. Everybody's talking about the violence, protests, and how to address these issues. They are talking about transformation of a society, Black economic empowerment, which is the majority of the people. So that's where the problem lies. There are huge grievances on the part, mainly from the Black majority in South Africa, the population of South Africa, that they have not seen the benefits of transformation.
Allow me to pick on something that you've said, which is very important. You mentioned the concept of collaboration, working with civil society. You've done research into these various areas, but also you talked about understanding the impact of relevant legislation from the point of view of the people. Have you tested the ground? Let's start with the collaboration aspect. Have you tested the ground? Do you think there is willingness, there is enthusiasm by research organizations or other relevant organizations, as you might identify, to be part of it?
Firstly, let me say, as far as this high-level panel goes, we're in the initial stages of planning. We still have to be approved by procurement. We're following that process. So we have not gone out to the community as yet, but we have set all these plans and ideas on what kind of workshops are we going to have, what kind of public hearings. we will have separate roundtables with experts, but mainly we want to reach out and hear the grievances of ordinary people. We want to cover the country, urban and rural. I have some experience because I chaired the committee that investigated violent attacks against foreign nationals in KwaZulu-Natal. There we had public consultations. We called in experts. There was overwhelming response from NGOs and experts and academics, almost 1,000 written submissions. So there are people working on these issues. They've done the research. The community meetings obviously were most interesting, particularly in the rural community. They do feel left out. Yet the rural communities were not affected by the so-called xenophobic violence against foreigners. That happened in the townships.
Okay, so you'll be tapping from current resources, whether it's parliamentary work that's been done or any other organizations, agencies, research institutes. You will be utilizing whatever is available.
The mandate is to look at all the laws passed by Parliament and come up with feedback on how the communities perceive the implementation of these laws. And then we are able to make recommendations. So this panel should be used by the general public in South Africa because it's a vehicle to put their voices across and their ideas on how they see improvement in implementation.
You're highlighting the importance of the input that you would like to get from members of the public. What assurance can you give to the people that their input will be utilized in the conduct of your work?
Obviously, in the final result, there are 3 sections, so we will have to have a reduced report. But we will synthesize all the information and grievances that come out from people. Also some good ideas on what are the gaps in the laws, which are the areas that haven't been addressed. For instance, you hear of indigenous groups in South Africa, such as the San people. They would be talking about land rights. There's the rights of foreign nationals, refugees, asylum seekers. So just many categories of people. The poor people, mainly, who are the most vulnerable and have not benefited from the rights to housing, rights to health. And also we will look at how women in particular are sensing the system. Have they seen changes in their lives? So the assurance is, I myself have never participated in a huge panel such as this, chaired by a former president of this country, and initiated with the idea from Parliament itself that the Speaker of Parliament should look into, set up some mechanism where they could assess the implementation of these laws. So this is not just any panel. These are highly experienced, serious people on this panel, and we can assure the general public that we will convey their concerns, probably not each and every grievance that comes to us. We will focus on the principal areas of the law and how it affects the people. We will not be able to do our job properly if we do not hear from the public and institutions, NGOs, and so on.
Judge Pillay, what do you say to an ordinary South African who has, particularly in recent times, experienced quite a bit of, or perhaps it's the profile that some of these incidents tend to get, instances of racism, crude racism on social media? We know that the Equality Court has been busy of late also, and there are various other things that get to be reported on a daily basis, and people talk. From the point of view of your committee, what's the relevance of that discourse, of that debate, with the purpose and intentions of your committee?
So, discrimination on basis of race, gender, sexism, discrimination of the other, because on that inquiry into the attacks on foreign nationals, so clearly there was stereotyping of foreign nationals, harmful stereotyping. of them by South Africans as well. So there's reams and reams of discrimination. Racism is the most obvious because we went through apartheid. People know and have suffered and know what it is like to be treated as a person with no human rights. I'm very proud that South Africa hosted the World Conference on Racism, Xenophobia, and Other Intolerances. And in 2009, there was the UN World Conference on the follow-up to that conference, and I was the secretariat of that World Conference in my capacity as UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. Unfortunately, President Obama declined to participate in that conference, and as soon as he announced that, then 7 European states withdrew one after the other. So the review conference was quite a challenge. But to me, I made a public statement that nothing is more important to me than ending racism because we experienced it. I'm very pleased that the South African government has now finally, after a long delay, has come up with a good national action plan on how to address discrimination. So this panel that we are going on will ask people, how do they see social cohesion? What are the isms, undercurrent and overt discrimination, and how we should be addressing these races? Is it just criminal prosecution, or should there be education starting at the primary school level?
Will you also be looking at the structural underpinnings of any threats to social cohesion and even continued discrimination?
That is so evident that is such a major source of grievance. So we have a society of inequalities, very rich people and very poor people. And the poor people happen to be those who were previously victims of apartheid. So structurally, we have to address that. We have to also address the rights and inclusion of minority groups in South Africa.
I suppose that the work of the panel has been structured in the way that it has, with an understanding that there is an interrelation between the various areas. Your area looks at social cohesion and nation building, but you've basically said now that the structural underpinnings of all that are not irrelevant to your very purpose. How do you intend to work together with the other committees within the panel?
Oh, let me emphasize, this is one panel. That's why we have one common meeting, and we have breakaway groups to focus specifically on the mandate given to each working group. And ours on social cohesion and nation building means we pick up what the other two committees have found on inequalities and discrimination, and on the land issue, which is a burning issue in South Africa. That means a proper distribution of the wealth of this country. Has Parliament in South Africa done enough about that? If not, what should we recommend? So we have our own ideas on the laws and what has been done. We feel that's our work, but we really look forward to people telling us how this should be addressed, because that will also help us strategize so that we don't tolerate extremists who resort to violent protest.
All right. What would you like your report to address? I know that you said you're starting out conceptualizing, plotting out your approach and everything, but surely there are certain key factors that you could say even now that your report should address.
I think the report should include all key legislation. You really can't look at each and every law, but we look at the key legislation. We ask the public, and we should reflect also on gaps. Is there some other laws that they should be passing? For instance, I hear the word transformation coming again and again from people. So they just don't want a little tinkering and little changes. They want a transformation of society so that it truly represents what the Constitution designed for us.
Judge Pillay, in the same vein, what would you like to see happen to your report?
I'm very interested to ensure that the voice of the people is reflected in that report, which means the report must be made public and acted on. That is my hope. Otherwise, I won't be involved in this. At a very early stage, that is what I was asking the Speakers Forum to commit to. That is that they will make that report public.
Okay. Just as we conclude and wrapping up, what kind of spread of competencies, passions within your own committee? I'm sure you got quite a mix of qualifications and experience there. Just give us a broad sense of what you've got in the fold.
Well, we have practitioners and academics and people who've worked on these issues. So a great deal of experience. There are two of us from KwaZulu-Natal, a professor, Lebo, who lectures in education. So you see, we need education to be one of our key recommendations. So it's good that she is with us in the social cohesion working group. We are highly committed people. You know, the academics are working full time, and yet they find so much time to appear at every meeting and participate fully. So no disputes at the moment. We know the direction. We all want something better, a better society in South Africa.
Wonderful. Led by a jurist, a judge of note, I'm sure that the work of the committee is in good hands.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate your time, Judge Pillay.
Thanks.
And thanks once again.